Hello everyone, good day to you wherever you are in the world, and thank you for joining us. Welcome to this Sensations English monthly webinar for teachers. I'm Adam, the ELT specialist at Sensations English, and today we're delighted to welcome our very own Gerald Smith, who will be speaking on students as journalists in English language classrooms. Just a reminder that if you are watching the webinar live, a CPD certificate will be sent to your email 24 hours after the webinar has finished. If you're watching a recording, then please make a note of your own professional development activity. The webinar will last an hour and will include time for questions at the end of Gerald's talk. Please feel free to write your questions in the Q&A box. The Q&A button appears when you move your mouse to the bottom of the Zoom window. And if someone's already written the same question, you can click the thumbs up button next to that question to move it higher up the list rather than writing it again. And if you need any help during the webinar, please contact me in the chat box. Now, just a little bit about Sensations English. Sensations English is focused on helping teachers to develop their skills, and we are very happy to present a series of webinars for teachers to enable us to build on quality evidence-based practice. You can view all our previous webinars on the Sensations English website, including our monthly webinars and a special series on using video in ELT. And these recordings all come with the slides from those sessions too. We hope that they will help you to develop your own practice and expand your use of authentic resources in your classes. Sensations English lesson resources are a great new advance in ELT content. We're delighted to offer teachers hundreds of video and news article resources, all graded at 5 CEFR levels and all with ready-to-use learning activities. They make video and news accessible to all learners and really hassle-free for teachers. We make 3 new 5-level resources every week, giving you access to the most up-to-date content to use with all of your learners. Our Sensations English Teachers Edition includes logins for all your students and a digital teacher grade book, which has tools which let you organise your students into classes, set tasks and monitor them live, and review your learners' progress over time. Start using this great resource in the Teachers Edition. Just go to the link on the screen or in the chat box to sign up. And now to tell you a little bit more about our speaker today. Gerald is an English language teacher and journalist based in Glasgow in Scotland. As a journalist, Gerald has written about L1 discrimination, teacher professional development, and online tutor marketplaces for ELT. Gerald currently teaches at Glasgow School of English and on the International Summer School for Teens. He's also one of our journalists at Sensations English. He lives on a houseboat with his partner and 2 cats. Gerald, thanks once again for being here, and it's over to you.
Thank you very much, Adam. Right, so the talk today is about students as journalists in English language classrooms. I've been a journalist for a couple of years now, and I realized while teaching English that a lot of the activities that I do as a journalist marry very well with an English language classroom. And so that's kind of where this talk comes from. Also working with the Sensations English has made it very easy to use news in the classroom. So that's another point that has helped inform this presentation. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about why we use news stories in class. We're going to talk about what journalists do, because we need to make sure we all know that. We're going to talk about setting up these productive skills tasks, these productive journalistic skills tasks. And we're going to talk about 3 main activities that I've done in the past: creating headlines, interviewing a partner or an expert, and news reports. And finally, we're going to talk about giving feedback on students' journalistic tasks. Well, to start, let's go with the question, why do we use news stories in the language class? And for this, I would like you to go to Mentimeter to share your own thoughts. Great, so we already have 2 responses, very nice. Mhm. Yeah, great responses. Mhm. Yeah, I think there's just so many reasons, but we already touched on a lot of big ones. Yeah, it's really interesting for students, right, to talk about the news. They probably know a lot about general news stories. And so if you bring into the classroom, they maybe already have an opinion about it. They already have talked about it in their own first language. So it's really cool. Yeah, they make students think. Yeah, they reflect on the world. I love this word, wider perspective. That's lovely. It brings the real world into the classroom. I love that, absolutely. I think that's something we struggle with, breaking out of the little walls of ELT. We need the real world, and journalism helps that. New language, absolutely, vocabulary, grammar, um, general knowledge, lots of vocabulary. And yeah, it's current. I think that's one thing that I love about Sensations is that, it's updating every week. And the fact is most ELT textbooks really are out of date by the time they're published. So that's not good. Um, and yeah, you can get different voices. Absolutely. You don't want to just have the teacher. Teachers are great, but we need someone else as well. I love that, guys. Really good, uh, good responses there. So I'll add a little bit to that, what we already just said. News stories can be used for establishing a lesson's context. You're doing a lesson about, I don't know, for example, you're doing a lesson about hotel workers. What do you need to do when you go to a hotel? Well, you can do a news lesson about our hotel competition. You could watch our video about the international receptionists competition. And that could start your class with a good context. It could grab the student's attention, right? Seeing a video is very present in a classroom, much more so than a text without an image or a text with just one image. It helps students express their opinions. I had a student who wasn't talking about his experiences, but then when he saw a video about Latin America, because he was from Colombia, he felt like he needed to talk about his experiences. So the videos can help with that. Of course, they can be used for receptive skills tasks, reading, listening. They can be used for language focused tasks like grammar and vocabulary. And then, of course, they can be used for productive skills tasks, which is what we're going to talk about, speaking and writing. So let's go to do another Mentimeter. What do journalists do, right? This is more general, but what do you think a journalist has to do on a daily basis? You can enter multiple responses for this one. Love that word, absolutely. Inform, first and foremost. Write reports, yeah. Different, find out, explore. Great, guys. Yeah, I love all of these words, a lot of I words. Interview. It's one of my favorite things to do in a classroom is have students interview each other. So I love that that's one of our first words. Research, absolutely. They need to research, fact check things, speak to people, they need to report events. So that has to do with the research as well and writing skills. Yeah, this is great. I love the tell stories. I love that too, because sometimes we think journalists are very elite people, but actually they're also storytellers. You know, they're just trying to tell you about some sort of story. So wonderful, great. Yeah, that's excellent. So it sounds like everyone knows about journalists and what we do. So yeah, my first thing, interview people. You know, interviewing people is very connective. We want to know a lot of different people. We want to get to know each other, and we want to be able to tell people stories, but we can't tell anyone's stories without talking to them. So perfect, interview people, write articles. Um, Now, articles, these can be opinion-based, or they can also be factual-based, more news story. But no matter what, right, there's some sort of slant in an article. We all are writing from our perspectives with our cultural baggage. So there is some bit of us in the article. We make oral reports, absolutely. You see that in Sensations English a lot. We also evaluate newsworthiness. You know, we have to decide whether we want to do a story, you know, or if it's worthwhile for our readers or not. Yeah. We need to document the world. I think this is a big part about it. We document what is happening in the world and we tell the world about that. You know, we try to make sure no one forgets the important happenings. And you know, when we're communicating with an audience, we try to simplify complicated issues. A lot of the times for Sensations, we have to write articles about an academic story like research, groundbreaking research in medical fields or business. That isn't something people will understand right away. So you need to simplify it into something that can work in just 150 words and at 300 words. Of course, they investigate and they try to find the truth. I put truth with a capital T because obviously sometimes the truth is more complicated than we like to say. Yeah. Let's think about this question. Students as journalists, what can they do? You can just put it in the chat box if you like. Just put in your chat box your answers. What can students as journalists do? Absolutely. Interview, we talked about that already. Well, I'll tell you, I think, fantastic, Elena, yeah, video reports. I love to have students record themselves. I love that. Yeah, talk about students' unsolved or ignored problems. I like that too. Yeah. I love that. Yeah, Bettina, I think that's perfect. Exactly what I think students can do as well. You know, they can do everything a journalist can does, but of course at their level. And I like what you say, guided by a teacher. They have to be guided with it. So students as journalists can do the same stuff that journalists do. Um, that being said, I'm not going to tell my students, okay, investigate City Hall. There's something corrupt in our City Hall. Now we need to go investigate. And I'm going to tell A2 students to interview the mayor. No, I'm not going to do that. But they can investigate whether they think something is fake news or if something is true or factual or not. So they can definitely do that. Elena, yeah, podcasts, absolutely. You can definitely do podcasts. That's something I like to do as well. Fantastic. Well, when we do these activities, we always need to set them up before they go. So once again, in the chat box, please respond to this question. What do you think students need before doing a journalistic task? Maybe it's very similar to what they need for any productive task. Yeah, good command of English. Well, an okay, or an okay command. They need to be able to communicate. Oh, I like that. Armanda, yeah. Language prompts, instructions, yeah. Yeah, clear instructions. Great, okay, so I have some ideas as well. I think the main things that they need are a context. They need, so that can be from the news report, right? A context from the video itself or from the article that you bring to class. Then they need some language, you know, we need the vocabulary to express ourselves about that subject. And we also need the grammar, perhaps. If we're talking about a past event, maybe we do need to use past simple, maybe we need to use present perfect, although I don't focus too heavily on that. And then, of course, we need an example. So if I'm asking students to do a news report, I need to give them an example of a news report. If I show them an interview, I need to, if I want them to interview each other, I need to show them an example of that. So I created a lesson plan about creating headlines. So the whole activity leads up to students creating headlines for an article that doesn't have a headline. They know everything about the article except the headline. Well, the first thing that they need to know is obviously what a headline is. Yeah, Armando, I like that as well. Language frames, vocabulary support. Yes, definitely, definitely. And you'll see like higher level students also need maybe less of this. And then lower level students need a lot, maybe. Yeah, although you'll be surprised as well. Sometimes higher level students aren't very confident. Great, so they need to know what a headline is. So I need to give them an example. So here's an example. I love this headline. Man wears new clothes. Lovely. And then I give them a sentence about it. Wow, what a boring headline. Yeah, that is a horrible headline. And then I give them another one as well. Oh, Queen Elizabeth is dead. You know, this headline is sad. Then we have to talk a little bit more in depth, you know, what is an effective headline and what is an ineffective headline. So for our class, what an effective headline is a headline that makes you want to read the article. And an ineffective headline is boring or unrelated to the story. So I have some examples. Which of these two headlines do you think are more effective? So number one, we have a story about elephants in Kenya, and they're losing their habitat because of avocados. Because of avocado farming, I should say. So the first headline for that is Elephants versus Avocados in Kenya. And then the next one is a new problem for elephants. In the chat, can you put a 1 or a 2 for if you think that one is the stronger headline? Yeah, I think that's going to be quick. You can put a reason why if you like, but you don't need to. So absolutely, I think so too. I think everyone has it. Number one is definitely more effective. It makes you want to read the article a little bit more, and it implies the conflict. It's also more specific, right? It talks about the problem itself has to do with avocados and elephants, and you know where it is. It's in Kenya. However, it's interesting when I do this in class, we watch the video from Sensations English, the video report about this, and beforehand, everyone thinks that the story is about elephants eating avocados because they like this idea, right? Elephants versus avocados, maybe the elephants are eating avocados. No, elephants don't eat avocados, they never would. But the headline kind of misleads you into thinking this, at least for some students. And so there's also a negative about the title, about the headline. And then a new problem for elephants, you know, there are positives in that it is very factual, right? It's very factual. It could be more specific though. So then I think we need to identify a little bit more what is an effective headline, and I give them rules. So there are rules for headlines. You usually keep them pretty short. They should be accurate and specific. You know, sometimes you get clickbait articles, obviously, that are not specific enough, and maybe they're not accurate. And then there's actually grammar rules for headlines. You're not supposed to use articles. So no a and the, no be verbs. And you're supposed to use to instead of will be. Katy Perry to be the next president, right? This is just what you would use instead of will. At the same time, the grammar ones, I always tell them, do not apply to expressions, right? They're not, you would never change an expression for that. Here's a lovely, lovely headline. What is wrong with it? It's actually a terrible headline. What is wrong with it? If you want, put in the chat box what you think is wrong with the headline. Yeah, it breaks the rules. You know, we're using a lot of articles, a lot of be verbs. And exactly, Bettina. Oh my gosh, it is way too long. A woman in Florida is the winner of a very important competition. Ah, horrible, absolutely horrible. Articles, adjectives, be verbs, yeah. Sort of nothing adverbials like very, horrible, horrible. So then I get the students usually to make a better headline, and eventually I show them what you could make as a headline. You could just say, Florida woman wins Taekwondo competition. It's a very basic headline, but it's direct, specific, and it's not too long. Then I usually do a follow-up activity, find 3 headlines from recent news and check if they follow these same rules that we just talked about. You'll be surprised. Actually, we say these are rules for headlines, but actually most headlines don't follow all rules to a T. Yeah. So then finally, we'll talk about the activity itself. So I give my students an article. This one is about wolves in, no, sorry, it's robot wolves in Japan. And basically, this small town has a problem with bears. And so they need something to scare the bears away. And how do they do that? Well, they install machine wolves all around their little town. And of course, then I have to ask students, read the article, understand it, and finally come up with a lot of different ideas for headlines. I usually ask that they come up with a lot more than one. You know, if really it's a nice class, I'll ask them to write 10. Otherwise, I'll ask them to write around 5. And then with a group, they share their headlines. They talk about which ones are really strong and which ones are not so much. And finally, we share the headlines together with the class, and they vote on which one is the best one. From this activity, my favorite headline is this: "A howl a day keeps the bears away." I just thought that was brilliant. Obviously, it's an expression, which is why we use all of these articles and everything. But yeah, it was just really good. Take that, bears. Another great way that we need to talk about is our interviews. That's a great productive task. So probably the activity I've done most in my career as an English teacher is this one. It's based on Humans of New York, which is a blog about humans, not necessarily in New York anymore, but basically strangers on the street. A journalist, Brandon Stanton, walks around the city with his camera and stops strangers on the street and asks them, "Hey, can I ask you some questions? And can I take your picture as well?" And you'll be surprised, a lot of people say yes. A lot of people like to talk about themselves. And it's a great context for students. They're instantly always thinking, wow, would I talk to this man? Would I talk to a man about my saddest moments, the death of my father, or my recent divorce? And of course, in Humans of New York, people do. Most students say they wouldn't. So how this activity runs is, after we establish the context, after we set it up, like how we set up the headlines piece, is we send the students, with the person, of course, with the teacher, out into the city, and they create humans of their city. So for me, I live in Glasgow, so I make humans of Glasgow. And the students will interview each other. Usually I tell them to record that interview. And I want them to take a photo of each other in the city. They get a free profile picture of the video, out of the activity. So they always like that. I usually also tell them to do at least 5 open-ended questions. This really gets students to know each other beyond these very easy things like, where are you from? How old are you? What do you like to do? And go more into, what's your favorite memory? Or if you could go to any country in the world, which country would you go to? Some people ask, what's your biggest regret? And it's it's kind of amazing, because even in A2, they will ask that. So that's more of just getting to know you interviews, right? And really getting to know your partner and your classmates. But you can also do easy role play interviews. Interviewing an expert is what I like to call it. So there's a great video on Sensations English about bug burgers. In Thailand, there's this restaurant that is experimenting with using bug meat in their burgers. They basically make it into a powder and they put it on the burger, but it's a great way to add protein to a meal. And it's very environmentally friendly as well. So in the journalism activity I've made with this, one student role plays the restaurant owner and the other one is a journalist. Then both get a time to brainstorm what they want to say, what they want to ask. So I also give them a motivation, right? The restaurant owner wants to convince everyone that they should try bug burgers and that they're great for the planet. And the journalist wants to understand how burgers work and why they're important to eat. So they're not really going against each other. They're really kind of working together to create a great interview and share information. Here's their planning sheet, not a big thing. So then there's quite a bit of learning outcomes from doing interviews. I'm sure you guys have done interviews in the past, and every time that we do them, I think we really get all of these. So students get to practice fluency, right? They aren't reciting that much. They're actually responding to one another in a natural way. Especially with like the Humans of New York activity, I've seen students grow from strangers to very good friends. So you get a good amount of bonding. And you get a lot of, you build confidence with these exercises. People really think at first, you know, an A2 student feels like they couldn't ever interview anyone. They couldn't ask anyone these questions or talk about themselves. But after the interview, they get that confidence and they realize, yeah, I can talk about myself. I can tell people about my experiences and they'll listen. You get a lot of emergent language from it. So topics come up, new words come up. And from those new words, you also get a shared vocabulary. The students will eventually make their own sort of lexis together, ways of communicating with each other that is specific to them, which is super cool. And finally, there's emergent contexts, which is like emergent language. You know, there's just some topics that will come up, like, let's say a student has never talked about Japan in English before, but one of the other students just really loves that country and wants to go there. Well, he's going to talk about it, and the other one will be forced to talk about a new context. Another activity is news report. We talked about videos before. That's a great way to get students engaged and thinking, yeah, I can do something different in English. So I have this news report. It's about an amazing Indonesian band. This story came out, I think last Friday. It was not long ago. And this Indonesian band has become very popular because it's very witty. It's about the Quran and the teachings of right and wrong, but it does it in a very witty and funny way. And so a lot of young Indonesian people love this band. So I thought this was a great way that students could make a news report about something like this. So they have to make a news report about Nasidaria using a fact sheet as a help, as a little guide to what they might say in their report. And then we record what they say, and we put it over the muted video from Sensations English. So that looks, the end product looks something a little bit like this.
Nasidaria started 47 years ago. All group members are from Indonesia. The band mixes Indonesian music and Arabic music. The band Nasidaria have 15 members. They play guitars, violin, drums, tambourine. The main audience of Nasidaria is young people from Indonesia.
So it's a very short report, but really effective. And I could tell the student afterwards was really happy that he was able to talk about this and was able to record it in a clear way. Also, that being said, with that activity, my students always talk really, really fast whenever they get recorded. So you have to kind of tell them like, hey, slow down, pause after every sentence. Very, very slow. You have to be very slow when you're recording. Lastly, I'd like to go over a little bit how to do feedback for students about these journalistic tasks, about interviews, about creating headlines, creating articles, creating reports. So let's go back to Mentimeter. How can we give students feedback? How can we give students feedback? Yeah, put key points on on the board. Yeah, definitely use the board. I think that's really important. There's another one. Make comments on some areas only. Yeah, I love this one. What went good, what didn't? That's really good. I almost always, try to ask that after the interviews activity. Yeah, because they can talk about very personal issues if they're interviewing each other. I always say before the activity begins, if you're uncomfortable by a question, you can say, and you don't have to answer it. Yeah. Use of speaking sub skills, yeah. Yeah, you can really analyze how they were speaking. That's one of the best ways of, because if you get them to record, they can actually, sort of analyze their own speech. I haven't done this, but you could even get a transcription software to transcribe what they said. And then they can really see what their speech looks like, and see if they're intelligible as well, if people can understand them. So yeah, this is great. Yeah, I think it's good, this one, make comments on some areas only. Don't try to go over everything. It's impossible, right? So limiting what we're commenting on is very important. Yeah. I have a couple more. Yeah, you can do self-evaluation. Usually how I would do this is give them a form to fill out about how they think their performance was in the interview or in the report. And that gets them really to self-reflect, which is something we do not do a lot in our day-to-day lives. So that's really good. Class discussion, you can have people discuss what went well, what went wrong, like we talked about. And you can discuss what was your favorite moment of the interview, what was something surprising you learned. Yeah, it's always interesting when you start quizzing them about how they did. Of course, you can give teacher feedback, just written and spoken, give that individually. I always think my students really do value when I say something, at least as long as I'm not doing it too much. So when they do get that sort of affirmation that they're doing well in class, they're getting better, it does help. And yeah, peer review, right? You could have someone else listen to the interview or listen to the audio report and check for if it's understandable and if they spoke too fast or too slowly. And yeah, you could also check for grammar. Okay. In summary, and what we've gone over, news stories provide effective and fun context for language classes. I think we all know that. That's why we're here. That's why we know about Sensations English. News is fun. News is readily accessible for every student. And it's just a great way to start a language class. We also talked about how journalists create a student-centered class. So this is really great. When students are interviewing each other, they're not talking to the teacher isn't necessarily talking to them, but they're learning really well. And we also learned every student can be a journalist. You know, really, your skills in English don't determine whether or not you can be a journalist, whether you can interview people or can do other things. Really, everyone can do this. And that's one of those interesting things about journalism, is that really the barriers to entry are very, very small. And of course, students build language skills, creativity, and confidence from journalism. Doing something independently will always make them feel better about themselves and give them the confidence to go out into the world. Okay, any questions? That is the end of our presentation. Please let me know if you have any questions about what I just said, or about Sensations English, or about anything in the classroom.
Well, thank you so much, Gerald. Now, if anyone has got any questions, please pop them in the Q&A box. We'll go through them. I've got a couple of questions that have come up for me, Gerald, that I just wanted to raise. I'm a little bit worried, or I know that some teachers would be a bit worried about how students would react if I take a kind of a journalistic approach in my classroom. You know, they might not see it as quite relevant to what they're doing and what they're there for their learning. Have you had any experience on that, or what advice could you give?
Yeah. So sometimes it depends on how you're framing it. You know, usually I don't tell my students right away, you're going to be a journalist today. I don't just come at them and say that. But sometimes they might think, yeah, this is a bit too much like work and not enough like play. So that needs to be framed sort of as, no, this is an activity that will broaden your horizons. I think with like Humans of New York, for example, luckily that frame, I don't even mention that they are journalists. They're doing a journalistic activity, but they don't know it. Yeah, have I had it? Sometimes, because it's very popular to do news in classrooms, have had it where a student had done a headlines class like 2 weeks before I did my headlines class. And you know, I just framed it as, no, this is going to be different though. And it was, of course it was. So depending on how you set it up and what your activity is, it actually will no matter what, be different and hopefully engaging. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. And another question, how would you adapt, like lots of us are teaching younger learners as well, and how would you adapt this kind of activity to apply it in classes of younger learners, say, you know, under 12 or under 12?
Yeah, under 12 is definitely harder. I think, for example, the news reports would probably be the easiest to adapt if you chose just a really interesting context for younger learners. You know, if you have something about, let's say, video games, we have like one about video game developers, or you choose a context about maybe a new pop star, or we have an article about this young person who became the youngest pilot to fly around the world. You know, if you do something that kind of connects with them, yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking of something I used to do with our summer schools, where we would choose pop stars and then we would write interview questions for them and then act out those interview questions for the different pop stars. And that was really, the kids were really getting into that.
Like they would role play the pop star as well. I love that. Yeah.
So delving into the imagination a little bit more, I think, is really helpful with those younger learners.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, use props as well, right? Just try to make it very readily understandable to them that this is something fun, something cool to do. it's not journalistic work, it's journalistic fun. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, yeah, building on what they know already about those, you know, and the areas they know. And I was just also thinking about school managers. I mean, the school that you're working at, is there anything important that school managers need to do to support teachers in, you know, using these kinds of activities with a journalistic focus? Do you find that as a teacher, you need a particular kind of, I mean, for example, you're allowed to take your students out of class for the Glasgow.
Absolutely. Yeah. So basically the manager, I'd say, yeah, has to make the teachers aware like what they can and can't do. And also be there for discussions about what you want to do in class. Because yeah, you might seem very like a really good idea to do an activity, and then the manager will say, well, actually, there's a lot of problematic things with this. I had this recently. I was going to do the bug burgers activity with my class, but I have some Thai students in my class, and apparently another student, unbeknownst to me, had made this really racist comment about what Thai people eat. And so, of course, when I wanted my students to do that, you know, they took it as offensive. They thought like we were saying Thai people eat bugs all the time, which of course is racist and not intelligent. But that's the kind of thing that I would hope a manager would be able to talk to you about and say, hey, yeah, maybe I'm going to have to support this teacher a little bit more, and also suggest don't do that activity, don't do that news story, do a different one.
Being aware of what the mood is in the school and any particular kind of concerns within a classroom, within that group of students, and that kind of sensitivity to topics. And yeah, it sounds like you did that in that context. I'm just checking if we've got any other questions. I think it's a slow day for questions today, Gerald. But if you do have any questions, then feel free to contact Gerald on socials and on email as well.
Yeah, definitely ask anything. Get in touch if you want. You can definitely add me on LinkedIn. I am on there sometimes. Sometimes I need a break. But yes.
So, and just to give Gerald a little break now, it's going to be me for a second. Just a reminder to everybody that Sensations English webinars will be back next month, and you can catch up with any of the webinars you've missed on the sensationsenglishwebinars.co.uk website. And I'll pop that link in the chat for you in a second. If you want to continue the conversation on this topic, you can reply to the posts on the social media that we've got. The other thing to say is that if you're interested in using Sensations English in your classes, you can get the teacher's edition for an individual teacher with all of the features that I mentioned before. Or if you're a school wanting to use Sensations English, then contact us via the website, and you can do that as well. Finally, just remember that you can get all sorts of resources as well for Sensations English on the Sensations English website once you're logged in, and start using graded, authentic global resources for ELT. Once again, Gerald, thank you very much for that wonderful talk, and to everyone here for taking the time to be here today. Have a great day or night wherever you are in the world. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.